Allison Rosen. Allison Rosen is your new best friend. Allison, with her good times never end. Allison Rosen, doing the wavy pencil dance again. Allison's your new best friend.
Hey everyone. Hi, hello. Welcome to another exciting episode of Allison Rosen is your new best friend. I'm very excited to welcome to the pod cabin writer, comic, Mike Drucker. He has a new book out called Good Game, No Rematch. And a little birdie called the internet told me it's not his first book, even though I read something where someone said, like, he's dipping his toes into the world of book writing now. Clearly, they don't have access to the same birdie I do.
Right.
Please put your hands together for him. This was a clumsy intro. Hello.
Hello,
Welcome.
everybody. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You've written multiple books, right?
I've written multiple books. To be fair, this is my first book for a major publisher. My last two books were for small, independent video game book publishers. So, this is like the first book that's been like in Barnes & Noble on release.
Okay.
Versus being like you have to order it directly from the company. But the past books I wrote were like more academic, more silly, and this is like much more of like a larger book. Gotcha.
Also joining us today is Tony Thaxton.
Hello.
I feel like I need a drop. I need a drop to it.
You usually do those on the group shows.
I know.
Now we're doing them here.
I don't know how anything works anymore. Isn't that clear?
All right, here you go. Your favorite then. I'm not going to look.
Oh, she is such a queen.
Oh, yes.
Two at once also.
What was the other one?
I don't know which one you heard.
I heard, oh, she is such a queen. Mike Drucker, that was my husband discussing Taylor Swift.
Oh.
What was the other one in there?
The other one in there I heard was,
don't fuck with America. Don't fuck with America.
And that was Holly Laurent discussing how she'll get a phrase stuck in her head while she's walking her dog.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it happened to be "Don't fuck with America." I once got the phrase "the fix is in" stuck in my head.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? I feel like I'm like a mafia boss or something.
Is it like the end of The Aviator where you're like the way of the future, like you're just repeating it again and again?
Kind of.
Yeah.
And then I always feel like when something weird gets stuck in your head, like I've had songs stuck in my head for years.
Yeah.
That if I were to analyze it, probably there's some rhyme or reason to why that particular thing is in your head.
Yeah.
I don't know. You must get... So, Tony.
Yeah.
Mike Drucker here, who I bet you follow on social media because everyone follows him.
Yeah. I although admittedly, I'm barely even looking at social media anymore.
know.
Which is for the best. Even as someone who's on it a lot, that's for the best.
So I was a follow on Twitter, though.
Yeah.
Right. So he's a big video game guy.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I bet you get video game themes stuck in your head all the time.
Well, I mean, literally growing up, I would hold a tape recorder to the television playing a video game to get that music on tape. Like now, video game music's everywhere. You can hear it in pop music with like sort of chiptune type 8-bit type music in songs. But they like actually sell like vinyl albums of game soundtracks now. And I own at least 30 different video game soundtracks on vinyl.
Wow.
But yeah, as a kid, like there was no other way to get it. So I would just hold up a Talkboy tape recorder to the screen and just get what I could.
Wow.
Talkboy, too.
What is Talkboy? Is that a brand? I don't remember.
It made famous in Home Alone 2.
In Home Alone 2, Kevin McAllister has a tape recorder that he like uses to record people and play pranks on other people.
Got it.
And I think everyone was like, oh, that we could just make that a toy and sell that. And they did. And so it was basically like a little handheld tape recorder that had like a mic you could extend a little bit and you could interview people and like slow down a voice or speed it up or kind of do like very simplistic editing on the device. It was really cool for a kid.
Was it like Teddy Ruxpin without the bear?
Yeah, it was a tape player. Yes, it was a tape player.
So you said that your other couple books were sort of academic.
Yeah.
And now I'm curious, even though I feel it's going to take us in a very nerdy academic direction, but I want to go there.
Sure. Well, I'll start this off even nerdier. I have a master's degree in English literature.
Oh,
so,
from where? I was an
NYU.
English major. Oh, well, look at you. I was an English major, but just BA.
Yeah, I got the BA, and then NYU had a program where they were like, if you stick around another year, you can like do almost like a bum rush master's where you have to do like a ton of classes at once. And I was like, yeah, I got no direction in life. I'll get my master's. But so there's this company called Boss Fight Books, and you've probably actually seen, you know, those 33 1/3 books where they're little books about music albums.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, but for video games. Sort of small, 30,000 word booklets almost about video games, and they've done 40 or 50 by this point. And I was asked to do one of my favorite games. And I was like, oh, man, this is like my one chance to use my master's in English Lit. So I basically wrote like a thesis paper on this video game, Silent Hill 2, and it was published as a book. But that was like much more like me breaking it down and looking at it. Like it was a little less comedy forward, even though I'm a comedy writer, and much more being like, oh, this is a fun chance to be academic again.
And what was your thesis?
My thesis overall was basically that the game itself is much more powerful because of the characters than the horror of like the monsters and everything. Silent Hill 2 is a very tragic game. It's about loss. It's also a horror game where there's monsters and stuff. But really, like a lot of the hardest, scariest, and saddest moments come from these like conversations between these characters that don't understand what's happening to them. And so that's kind of the main thesis of it.
Very much like people on this earth.
Like people on this earth, yeah.
It's a real Waiting for Godot.
Yeah.
What is the game?
The game is it's called Silent Hill.
I mean like what goes on in the game.
Oh, in the game, there's basically this town called Silent Hill. Imagine your normal, almost like Twin Peaks.
Okay.
In fact, the series was largely inspired by Twin Peaks. And these people show up at this town, and when they show up there, suddenly like they're the only ones there. Everything is empty, as if everyone had just disappeared from the town. Like there's still like food on stoves and stuff, and like diners are open, but nobody's there. And there's sort of fleshy monsters, and over time,
fleshy monsters?
like kind of like not like zombies, but imagine like almost like zombies, but if they were head to toe covered in skin,
like humans,
but their face is covered, their head's covered.
In what though?
Like just like flat skin, so like no facial features, no hair. Like imagine like glossy,
it's like just a walking
melted
thumb.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of, yeah. Actually,
As
that's
I
not a
always
bad way.
famously say.
That's not a bad way to put it. Actually,
They don't have eyes or anything.
Some of them don't. Yeah. But like then they come in different forms. Like there's one character who she's in this sort of, and you all find out these characters have done something terrible to end up here. So it's unclear if this is hell or their own personal punishment or they're being haunted a certain way. But there's like a guy who was bullied and ended up sort of killing his bully. There's a woman who was abused and killed her family, and you kind of like
are they
deal
all
with their
kind
stories.
Of righteous crimes, quote unquote?
Hers is his. The more you talk to him, the more you feel like he just went nuts on something small and went insane. But that's also part of it, is these people sort of pushing through these conversations, and it can get disturbing at points. Like the woman who was abused, her storyline's really, really sad. It's really powerful. But when you have to deal with like the monster she's facing, it is in the shape of a man attached to a bed. And so it's this very creepy image.
Upsetting.
It's all intentionally done so. And it's actually one of the things that I appreciate about the game is it actually does it with a finer touch than I'm making it sound like they did it.
Question.
Yes.
Because this is important.
Yes.
Though this woman you're talking about and the guy who killed his bully, are they these featureless flesh monsters?
No, they're like the only humans. Like
got it. So they're
people.
Humans, and then they're fighting these flesh monsters.
Right.
And who are you?
You are a guy named James who is in this town because he received a letter from his wife who died years ago saying to come visit her. And you know at the beginning of the story, and you find out more as it goes, as he begins to remember things about his relationship that you might not be expecting. As it goes on, you find out that this town is where they like went on vacation, like a honeymoon or something, and it was really special to them. And so, he receives this letter that's like, come visit me at our special place. So he shows up at the town completely lost, and he's trying to find what he thinks is dead wife. And it gets very sad. It's a very sad video game.
It starts out very sad, too.
It starts very sad and then gets way sadder. It gets so much sadder.
Wow. So I only know a touch about video games. Like I've obviously, played them here and there. My husband goes through phases where he's into them. Yeah. Is this a what kind of game is this? Is it first person? Is it on a rail? It's not on a rail.
It's called survival horror, but I would say it's called third person. So when you see over someone's shoulder? Yeah. That's called third person. And first person is when you just see like the gun.
You see over James' shoulder?
Yeah. And you're sort of like as he's walking, it's almost like the camera's right behind him.
Right. What kind of hair does he have?
Normal guy hair. He looks like a normal guy. He's got like sort of like it looks like a little army surplus type jacket on, but very normal man. And part of what actually makes Silent Hill an interesting series is, unlike a lot of games, these aren't like hyper masculine supermen. Like, he gets tired after running for a little bit, and you have to like stop and let him breathe. And so as you're playing these characters, you're not getting that powerful wish fulfillment fantasy a lot of these games give, so much as like you're like, oh man, I'm really getting lost in this.
So did they say to you, would you write about Silent Hill, or were they like, would you write about your favorite game?
They said, would you like to write about your favorite game? And I pitched a couple ideas, and they were like, Silent Hill 2 is the one we're most excited about, because it's also the one that has a cult following, so they really wanted to, like, do something that would sell. And so, and it was a super fun process, but it really was like going back to grad school and like doing a ton of research and writing papers. And it sounds like I actually really enjoyed that. So it was actually like very fun to finally use my master's.
Did you think at one point that you would go into academia?
I did. For a while I thought, maybe I'd get my PhD and I'd teach. But like when I was in grad school for that year, I talked to a lot of the people who were PhD students who were, going for the long haul. And, they really made it sound like almost like the priesthood, where they were like, if you're not certain about this, do not do it.
Yes, I remember talking to a professor, because for like a hot second I was considering grad school.
Yeah.
I always felt like I'm sort of, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I should have gone, but it wasn't because it was my passion. It was more of a like, what should I do? Maybe I should do this, like backing into it. But I remember almost being talked out of it by professors like, a job is not guaranteed. It's really bleak. So only do it if you have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's a ringing endorsement.
But at least they're honest about it. Like, it's not like a cult where they're like, no, this is the best life. It really is like, if you're not absolutely sure, don't.
Right. So that's what the PhD students were
That's what the PhD
you.
students were saying. They said it more gentle than that. They weren't like trying to sell me out of it, but it was more like just know what you're getting into if you went into it.
Yeah. So you would have been an English professor.
I probably would have been an English professor, or some type of literary professor adjacent to that.
Right. Is there a certain author or style or time period that you were most drawn to?
Not really in terms of expertise. My thesis was on my grad thesis was on a book called The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe. And my thesis was basically about fan culture in the late 1700s and early 1800s, where a novel would become popular and people would write poems based on these characters, or they would bootleg the book and they would write a different ending if they were unhappy with the ending, or tailors would they would like put an outfit in the window and say, this is what they wore in the novel, even though merchandising didn't exist yet. There was no licensing. These people, just like we do today, would be like, oh, I love this piece of fiction. I'm going to make money off it, even though I didn't make it. And so that was my main thesis, was just looking at all these different offshoots of what you could call early fan culture.
Right. Oh, that's really cool. Do you, speaking of Goethe, which I never do you know the poem, The Earl King, perchance? It's like Earl.
Verreitet so spek der knock und wind, es ist der Vater mit seinem Kinn, hast dem Nebel.
Yes, but in English.
Yes.
Yes, I read that poem in like 8th grade or something. A translation, obviously.
Yeah.
But I haven't thought of it in so long, but that was always one of my favorite poems.
Yeah.
And I'm not really a horror person, but anyway, Tony, if I remember correctly, it's like, who rides so late in a night so wild. It's the Earl King riding with a child.
Yep, that's right.
It's this dude. Correct me
you're absolutely right.
It's a guy on a horse riding with a child. But what he doesn't know is that in his arms, the child lay dead, right?
Yeah, it's basically
haunting.
The child is dying, and then the Earl, like basically the Elf King, is kind of like, sorry. The Elf King is basically like, come with me, child. And the father's like, it's almost like
Grim Reaper.
Exactly. And by the time the dad gets there, the child is dead.
Yeah.
It's not a happy poem. And you know what? The German doesn't make it more happy.
Right. No, I'm sure I've read a few different translations and I'm like, well, this one doesn't rhyme, so I don't appreciate that one.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I can't really handle horror.
Yeah.
Watching my husband play BioShock was intense for me.
Yeah.
And yet, for some reason, in poems, when there's a twist, I always enjoy that.
And I'm kind of almost like that with horror games. I find I really like literary horror and I really like video game horror. For some reason, I find movie horror that has a lot of violence hard for me. It's almost like the helplessness of watching someone get tortured just freaks me out on a very primal level in a way that I don't find cathartic.
Should.
Like I like a good haunted house film, but something like the Saw movies, I understand the appeal of them, but like they just deeply bum me out.
I actually don't know that I understand the appeal.
Me neither.
I think that they're sort of like
Let's ask a guy with a master's, Mike.
Well,
I mean, I think there's people who just like gore in general. And they're like, it's gnarly. But I also think that they're like these cool traps, almost like in the Final Destination films where someone's going to die, but you're like, how does this happen?
Goldberg-y kind of thing.
Exactly. And both, like, kind of in their own way, do, like you said, Rube Goldberg-y type things where it's like, okay, and Saw, it's like, you didn't do this, then this happens, then your head blows open or something.
But they're not cartoony, though, are they?
No, but I think for a lot of people, it feels the same.
Okay.
That it's such exaggerated violence that it almost goes past the uncomfortableness that maybe you or I feel with it. Like, it's sort of like, well, this would never happen. This is just bonkers and dumb. Which is why I think a lot of people, like, laugh through horror films. It's not like, this is funny, they're hurt. It's more like, this is ridiculous, you know?
Right. Okay. I mean, if it's almost like a spoof, then, I mean, I know it's not, but that makes sense. Okay, so how did you get into comedy writing?
I had always liked comedy throughout my life. As a kid, we went on a lot of road trips, and my dad had a lot of comedy albums we'd listen to. But it was just never something that I thought I'd do because comedian always seemed like something that like special people do. Like when you grow up, there's no Lego that is a comedian. There's like a fireman and a policeman and someone shopping and a store, but there's no comedian Lego. And so I just put it away. And in college, I went to college in New York, like I said, and I had friends who were like, you're funny, you should do an open mic sometime. And I don't know, for some reason it got stuck in my head. And because it's New York, there's open mics everywhere. Almost every club has one, almost every bar has one, so it's very accessible, luckily. And so I went to the New York Comedy Club, paid my $3 or $5, however much it was, waited my hour and a half in like a very tiny room, and I did stand up for the first time. And then from there, I was like, I'm not good at this yet. I was terrible, but I was like, I think this is something I want to try. Like it was.
And so that's when you were undergrad.
That was when I was undergrad. I was 20 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I started pitching to places. Like I started pitching to McSweeney's, and I started pitching to The Onion. And, like our college newspaper was called the Washington Square Press. But on April 1st, they did a parody newspaper, and I wrote a ton for that. And so I really just started, once I found comedy with stand-up, I was like, I want to just make comedy. So whether it's stand-up, whether it's sketch, whether it's writing things, I just want to make jokes. And that's how I kind of fell into comedy writing. And I think comedy writing, even loving stand-up as much as I do, I think comedy writing is where I'm like, I could do this anywhere at any time.
So, okay, so then you do your master's, and then where did you go from there?
So after my master's, I got a job at a boutique advertising agency that fired me after 6 weeks.
Oh, for what?
It was one of those quit fires where you ever have a meeting at a job where they're like, listen, if you don't improve things, we're going to have to let you go. And I was sort of like, I think I'm going to go.
You're like, I will make that decision for you.
It was a very small agency. It was an agency that I believe that helped bigger agencies advertise to the elderly. So it was already kind of a bummer. But there were two problems. One is the guy was one of those bosses, the boss of the place, because there were only like 8 people who hated his life, complained about his life, and would stay super late, but everyone would have to stay late because he was staying late. And so and when I got the job, I was even like, hey, I'm doing stand-up. Is it okay when my work's done if I leave? And they're like, of course. Yeah, 6 p.m. Get out of here. And then I would do that, and I started to get reprimanded where they're like, usually we stay until he leaves. And it was the first time I had a job where like everyone would stare at their computers until one man left, and then they'd all shut off their computers and leave too. And I was like, this makes no sense to me.
Yeah, no, it's like a cult.
And so they didn't like me. I mean, the boss didn't like me. The rest of the people felt like they must have known I was not long for that world. And so I left that. And while I was in college, before I graduated, I had interned at Saturday Night Live. And luckily, after a bit of a wait, they had an open spot for an assistant/researcher. And so I got to work at SNL for 2 years, which was really cool. It was awesome. It was such a good time. It was the time of like Andy Samberg and Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig and Maya Rudolph and Amy Poehler. And you had writers like Paul Appel, who's now a famous actor, but you had Paul Appel. You had all these great people who, despite all of the stories, were so nice to both, me as an intern and me as an assistant, to the point where they let me start submitting Weekend Update jokes. And it took me a very, very long time to get any on because I just think it took me a long time to understand what I was doing with it. But I mean, they didn't have to do that at all. They didn't have to do that. It was a courtesy of them to have some young idiot write jokes that weren't as good as the staff's jokes. But I think without that jump, I don't know if I would have ended up where I am now.
Who was hosting Weekend Update at that point?
It was Seth and Amy, and then just Seth.
Okay. So you did the 2 years at SNL, and then what?
And then after about 2 years, I had been getting a fair amount of jokes on the show, and I was like, try to start a conversation about maybe being hired as a full-time writer. Because I had been doing well with jokes. It wasn't just like one odd one here or there. I probably got, 10 or 12 throughout the season, and I was like, I feel like I have a good hit rate. And they were like, we love you, but we think maybe a few more years, you're still a bit green. And they were probably right, but I was kind of eager and hungry, and I was worried.
No one who's green ever thinks they're green.
Right, exactly. And so just by chance, I happened to get recommended for a job at Nintendo of America because they were looking for comedy writers. And so I was like, okay, you know what? If this isn't going to happen, I'll at least apply at Nintendo, assuming I would never get that job. And I ended up getting a job at Nintendo and moved out to Seattle for that.
What were you doing at Nintendo?
I was a localization writer-editor. So my job was to work directly with a Japanese translator, like we were a team, and I would help make the jokes or anything make sense in English. And that's not just translation. That's also like, if a character has a rough and tumble accent in Japanese, a rough and tumble accent in English can mean different things. Like a Brooklyn accent's different than a Cockney accent.
Right.
And so you're kind of having these conversations with like, if they have an accent like this region of Tokyo, it's sort of like this, but not quite like that. And you're really parsing things. Or, things like idioms. Like it's so easy to forget like an English phrase like a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. If you directly translate that, it sounds insane. And the reverse happens as well, where there's just turns of phrase that if you directly translate it or don't explain it, you lose the spirit of the meaning, even if you're giving the closest word-for-word translation.
Literal, yeah.
And for some games, this was just making sure it followed the style guide, making sure everything was spelled right, and the characters were charming. And for one of the games I was on, which was called Kid Icarus Uprising, they wanted it to be a comedy game, and the director of the game, this guy named Masahiro Sakurai, who's kind of famous in that space, he in our early conversations was like, I want you guys to make this as funny as possible. So I trust you. I will give you our scripts every day, like the new scripts, the new pages. And as long as the joke fits the spirit of what the joke means. So like, if it's a nervous moment, or if it's like, oh, I'm flirting, or if, like that, the joke would have to fit that. But we never had to do like what's the closest we can get to the phrasing of the original.
Right.
And it was such a cool experience.
So I played Kid Icarus on the original Nintendo.
Yeah.
Is this the same game?
Same one. It was the third in the series. They had done one on Nintendo, one on the original Game Boy in like 1991, and then like 2014 was like the last one.
I can't remember. You're shooting like a bow and arrow,
bow and arrow.
right?
Yeah. You're like an angel named Pit. Even though it's called Kid Icarus.
And what do you do? Are you climbing up ladders?
You're sort of climbing up these levels and making it this way through the underworld. Kid Icarus Uprising is a little more like you're flying through different lands, and you're like underground, and then you're like above the earth. It's much more spacey. But the original was like kind of exploring the underworld per se.
But are there like little sort of laddery things that you're climbing and you can fall?
In the
right?
first two games, yeah. In the third game that I worked on, it's much more like your character's flying and you're behind him.
Like third person?
Third person. You got it. Third person. But almost a little more like, like an arcade game where you have like a gun and you're kind of shooting enemies. Imagine sort of closer to that.
Right. Now, so I read a few excerpts from your book, and you're talking about the zapper in the original.
Yeah.
The NES, I guess is that.
Yeah,
is
the
that
original zapper gun for the Nintendo.
At a certain point, they made it orange.
They made it orange
because,
at a certain point.
I only knew the gray one.
And that's what we had growing up.
Right.
I think in the late 80s and maybe even early 90s, they switched it to orange just because there might have even been toy laws that made them do that. But I think it was that whole like, let's make this less like a real gun.
It didn't really look like a real gun, though. But I guess
maybe from far away.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's like gray and white. I could see like somebody in bad faith misinterpreting it.
Has a cord, though. Like all guns do. Okay, so then you're at Nintendo.
Yeah.
Did you work with the same Japanese person the whole time?
Yeah. He was an American who had lived in Japan a very long time.
Okay.
But I did work with the same translator the whole time, who's a great dude. He's still there. The nice thing is, like, it's this area they call the treehouse, this department, which is very fun. And you're also working with a lot of other translators and writers, so it's not like you're siloed off. Like, you'll pass pages to a friend and be like, what do you think of this? Or like, hey, we're a little stuck on this phrasing. What's your opinion? And so the company is very, very collaborative that way. Like, it's not, you have ownership of a project in the sense of you're the lead on that project or you're the secondary lead on that project. But it's not like doing a test and keeping it from the other people because you want to be the best translator.
Right. It's interesting because as someone who doesn't play video games, I don't think I think that's fair to say I don't play video games. I don't think I realized that they would hire comedy writers or that they're very funny.
It's more of a recent development. I mean, if you look at older games that try to be funny, you can tell for a lot of them, not all, because there have been funny games throughout the history of games, but a lot of them you can tell it's like some guy who watched a lot of Monty Python thinks that he got it, or like every character has the same sense of humor, so like you're kind of bored by it because everybody's saying like that just happened, like it's kind of that type of humor.
Oh, no.
I think in the last 15 years or so, they've realized that they need like real writers, just like they need real artists to like design characters. They need real writers to make those characters sound like real people.
Got it. Okay, so you're there for 10 years.
2 years.
2 years. That's so much fewer than 10.
I know. It was a great place, though.
Yeah. Okay, you're there for 2 years. Then what?
Then I got a job. This company got a bunch of funding from YouTube they wanted to make sort of a video game comedy channel. And it paid a lot more than Nintendo, even though I didn't realize moving to San Francisco would mean it paid a lot less than Nintendo once I was done with expenses.
Cost of living, yeah.
But I really didn't want to leave Nintendo. It's a special place to me. A lot of friends are still there. It's one of the few places I've ever worked where I've left loving the place more than I did when I came in.
That's special.
But the problem with it was it's one of those places where nobody leaves and nobody retires. And so you'll make more money each year. They give you raises. They're very generous.
Wait,
but
why is that a problem?
Because the job you have when you start is the job you have 15 years later.
Okay, so they're not promoting people.
Right.
Because sort of like the housing market. There's just a lack of inventory.
Exactly. And, the flip side of it is it's so good to work there that people don't want to leave, even if you have the same job for a long time. But, things were popping off and I was starting to get like road work with stand-up, and I was doing I got Seth Meyers asked me to do the ESPN Awards with him, and so things like that started to pull me away, and there was an opportunity to run my own gaming YouTube thing and like be in charge of it and produce it. It felt like a natural step for the career I needed, so it was really like a Sophie's choice of like leaving the kingdom of heaven, but to like sort of fulfill my career more.
Okay, so you went to San Francisco to do, what was the name of that company?
IGN. And they do like video game stuff in general, but they had like this new sort of vertical they were doing.
How long were you there?
I was there 1 year. Because at the end of that year, I was hired at what was then Late Night with Jimmy Fallon and later became The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon.
And now in LA, right?
New York.
New York.
So I went,
right.
I moved from New York to Seattle to San Francisco to New York.
How long were you at Fallon?
I was at Fallon. I've worked there a couple times over the years, but my first run was 4 years.
How was that?
It was good. I mean, it's late night shows are an intense atmosphere. You have to wake up in the morning and pitch things. You have to be writing throughout the day. The news can suddenly change. A celebrity can drop out of a sketch, and you either need to change the sketch or work with the producers to find a celebrity who might just be in New York who's willing to like jump in at the last second, which luckily with Broadway you often have. So it's a very intense environment. But that said, coming from being like a studious academic, I was like, all right, I'm doing my homework. So I kind of enjoyed it. Like I liked it. Now, it was definitely a lot of work. It was very tiring. And when the news was super bad, it wasn't always fun to write about that news.
What years were you at Fallon the first time?
I was there 2013 through 16. Then I was there, or maybe 2012 through 16. And then I was there 2023 through 2024.
Okay. So after the first run at Fallon, where did you go?
I went to, I was the head writer for Bill Nye Saves the World on Netflix. And then, which was like a fun little science type talk show. And it was super fun to work with Bill. Like I had watched him as a kid, and It was almost like, working with like it's almost like working with like Bugs Bunny, where you're like, I watched you as a child and now you're my boss. Like you're a silly man I saw on TV, but now like not like I answer to you in a bad way, but like, I get to make things for you.
Yeah.
So it was.
You worked with my friend Cece Pleasance there, right?
The nicest person on planet Earth, Cece Pleasance.
A long time.
I love Cece. Cece Pleasance is such a good writer. She was one of the writers who like glued that show together.
Yeah, she's the best.
Without her, that show would have been much messier.
Nice. I want to meet the nicest person on
I've
earth.
I've tried to get her on a Tony's Picks before, but she was busy writing for a while.
Very nice of her. Let's try again.
We will.
Okay, so you work with the nicest person on supposedly allegedly nicest person on earth who's too busy for my show. At the Bill Nye Saves the World.
Yeah.
And then what?
Then I did Adam Ruins Everything with Adam Conover.
Okay. Was that in LA?
That was also in LA.
Okay.
And that was super fun. I'd known Adam before he had the show, so I felt like I had a leg up in that, like, we already had a rapport. So like landing at the show, even though I was there the second season, like I felt like I understood his rhythms really well. That was also fun to work on. And again, like part of the theme for a lot of these is research heavy shows. Mm-hmm. Because there's part of me that likes doing comedy where I get to explain things.
Mm-hmm. How didactic. So Adam Ruins Everything. Then what?
Then one more season of Bill Nye Saves the World. And then I got hired by Samantha Bee to do Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, where I worked for 5 years, and I eventually became co-head writer and executive producer.
Nice. How was that whole experience?
It was so good. Sam is, I mean, I know I just said this about Cece, but Sam is like,
yeah, but we don't believe it about Cece because we already have evidence of her not doing something not so nice.
There's very few people I would be like, I would take a bullet for. And Sam is just like so good.
Would you take one for Cece?
You know what? I would depends on where the bullet would hit, but yes. With Sam, I would like do a full-on body dive.
So it's conditional.
It's conditional. She's so professional. She's so good. She's like, and she's, with late night hosts, they're very busy, so they don't always have time to like listen to people, or, it's a game of telephone because they're on a shoot, so, and none of those problems. She was great she always wanted to communicate. She wanted to listen to people top to bottom on the show. And she also had a quality that I love, and this reflects that old job I talked about, which is she wanted to do the job as well as possible, and then go home. She didn't want to hang out after. The job was not her social life. Mm-hmm. The job was not for her to like get paid to throw a party every so often. It was like, we're doing the job, we're going home. And to me, that's like, I was like, that is all I want from this.
Yeah. No, SNL was the opposite of that, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of staying late. I think it's changed a bit since the pandemic. I think that's loosened up a bit in terms of like a lot of the late nights. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like you would stay late. And even, though I wasn't a staff writer, I'd be late either pulling research for things like, this was early internet, so they still kind of needed researchers to help them find things like YouTube clips of speeches, or things like that. Or like, when I was an intern, going out in the middle of the night and picking up food for someone in the snow. So you'd have these really late nights. Then again, but on the, I was in my early 20s, so back then it was super exciting versus, when I was in my 30s and 40s, and I'm like, I just want to get a paycheck and go home.
Yes. So Good Game, No Rematch.
Yes.
Your memoir.
Yeah.
About a life of video games.
That's right.
Tell us more. So
the origin of it was when you're in comedy, your managers and agents are always trying to get you to do like a one-man show. They're always like, we need to get you to Edinburgh. We need you to do like a one-man show. And I've always wanted to. And I wanted to do one that was based on games because
but why though? Why the one-man show and why Edinburgh? Like, what is that a career maker?
I think it's. I think at one point it might have been like it's one of those things where if you get noticed, then you can do a run of it in the U.S. to more theaters. It's like you do a small run in the U.S., you figure it out, do it in Edinburgh, say you did it in Edinburgh, get the reviews, and then tour with it and hope that you eventually, sell it to Netflix. Yeah, exactly, or that. Yeah, right. Exactly. But the problem is like, a one-man show is an hour, and I was struggling with telling these stories in a way that wasn't just me shoving in references. Like, I didn't want it to just be like, you remember this? This was fun. You remember this? This. Like, I didn't want it to just be nostalgia because enough of that exists. I really wanted it to filter through the comedy of growing up with this and how you embarrass yourself with it or how it comforts you.
It being what?
Video games.
Okay.
You know, because there's so many books about sports like this, books about movies like this, books about music like this, where it's people saying how these art forms changed the way they see the world or made their lives better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I wanted to do, but I didn't quite have the space to do it the way I wanted.
In a one-man show.
At least at that time, I couldn't quite crack it. So I put it on the back burner, and then...
But you knew from the beginning... Sorry, I feel like I'm
No, you're all good.
Your flow.
Please.
From the beginning, did you know the thing I want to create is going to be about my relationship with video games?
That was the two ideas were that and Christmas, and the Christmas one, my manager was like, I don't know about doing a Christmas thing in July, and I was like, you're probably right.
I mean, you have to know that Tony hosted a podcast called Feliz Navi Pod.
Oh, do you?
Used to, long time.
I'm a big Christmas
around.
fan. I'm a
Me
big
too.
Christmas fan.
Yeah.
Me too.
So I would have bought it.
In fact, like one of the books I'm thinking of pitching next is sort of doing like another book like this, but about Christmas throughout my life.
Nice.
If they would let me do that.
I'm in. I will read that. Yeah. Okay. So you're two. So Christmas got shelved.
Yeah. And then the game thing got shelved. Yeah. And then the writer's strike hit in 2023, and I was like, I can't pitch a script. I can't pitch a show. But books are not, part of the television or movie industry. They're their own thing. So I could pitch a book. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this idea, dust it off, expand it, because I can now do it the way I want it if I'm not limited by length. And I pitched that out.
And then was it, did someone buy it right away?
Yeah, we were very lucky in that. I mean, I was also lucky that since I had a TV agent, they could refer me to a book agent. Like, I didn't have to go through a lot of the suffering many people do where they have to, submit and find an agent, then the agent has to take them and believe in them. I was lucky that I got to jump in line in that way. But no, we got 2 bids almost immediately from 2 different publishers, and luckily people wanted it. And so, we made it.
That's awesome. And how was the writing process?
It was a lot of work. It was, it's like 85,000 words. It was the writing process for me was almost like the same feeling of jumping into a very cold pool, where it's almost like, let's go. It's like almost like me having to take a giant breath, like a metaphorical running start to get writing.
Mm-hmm. And then you kind of had to force yourself to do it? Force
myself to do it, but in such a way where I'm literally sitting there being go, and then I would start going, and it would, I'd write as long as I could until my brain was we can't do this anymore, and I would stop. But usually I tried to have a goal of 2,000 words a day, 3,000 words a day, or if a chapter I knew was going to be shorter because it was a shorter story, let's just knock out this one specific chapter, and that kind of helped. The other nice thing is it's a memoir, but it's not a solid arc all the way through. You could read each chapter individually. So I had the advantage of being able to be I want to talk about this today. No, I'm going to do that one today. I'm going to do this other one today, even though it's a different area.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't always limited to being how do I figure out what to say next after this part?
When you do a book proposal for a nonfiction book, you turn in a chapter list or an outline.
Yeah.
So ahead of time, did you know all the stories you were going to tell, and did you stick to it?
I knew. I thought I knew all the stories I was going to tell. I'd probably stuck to 85% of them. There's one or two that, as I was writing them, I was this isn't good, or it. I talk a lot about my family and struggling with my family, and there was a fine line to walk with. I wanted to be honest about growing up in a situation that wasn't always pleasant, but nor did I want this is a hit piece on my family.
Right.
And so, there were some stories that might not have been there might not have been an upside enough to what happened in it to be included. And there's, other stories that, just didn't have enough meat on the bones.
How did or does your family feel about it?
I think they have. Well, my brother loves it because he looks good in all the stories. And my sister's you mentioned me babysitting you guys. That's what I did. My dad has mixed feelings on it. He's the one who has the most. He has one chapter where he's the hero of the chapter, but he also has a lot of chapters where he's not. And I would say he is psyched in the sense that someone wrote a book that he's a character in. And I think that there's a part of him that's I'm famous now, even though it's not true. On the flip side, I think it's part of him that's you really you really talked about me swinging back at you when we were driving. And I was well, you did that. So he has mixed feelings on it, but I did send him it before it was out. I definitely, I wanted to be honest about my family, but nor did I want this to seem like a drive-by. You know, like I wanted him to be aware of what was in it. He made 4 requests, 2 of which I gave, and the 2 I gave involved like me making sure that anything professionally I mentioned him doing, I made as vague as possible so it didn't affect him, which perfectly fine because those, you know, it's not load bearing.
He's in the CIA.
He's in the CIA.
Oh, yes.
Man, that would be so much better. That would be so much better. But yeah,
What was the other request? Or were they both related to his
They were
work?
both related to that. It was like one, like, can you make sure that nobody can tell who this coworker is who I had a negative experience with? And I was like, absolutely. And he was like, can you also make sure that like you say this about the job rather than that? And that was actually more a little accuracy on what his job was. But like, you know, a couple other requests, like, can you like not say that I hate you? I was like, no. But I did give him those because I, you know, again, like I wanted to be honest, but I wasn't trying to blow up his life. And he's in his late 60s now, so it's not like he's going to get canceled.
Right.
But I could see his job being like, hey, man, we wish your son didn't mention us.
Yeah.
You know?
So was it a problem that you didn't concede on a couple of them?
No, I think the fact that I listened to him on anything to him made him felt seen and heard.
Right. So
You know.
what is your dad like?
He's a weird dude. He's sort of one of those people that he was like giant into pop culture and music and comedy and television and movies. And then like the moment he had kids, he kind of just like calcified in time. And it's not like an old rock dad. It's more like a guy who's kind of floating through the world trying to figure out his place still. But, you know, ultimately a nice man, especially later in life now that my parents are a little more financially secure. But he's kind of I don't know. He's a weird dude. He's one of those guys that really wants you to like what he likes and will stop at nothing to force you to like it until you really don't like it. So it'll be like, you got to watch this television show. And I'll be like, okay. And he'll be like, oh, you got to watch it. And I'll be like, I will. Then I'll visit them for whatever reason. He'll be like, I need you to sit down and watch it. And I'm like, by this point,
Like
I hate this.
What show are we talking about?
I feel bad because I don't want to crap on any shows.
Okay.
But a couple procedurals and a couple comedies that are clearly made for older gentlemen. And I don't want to crap on anyone's work. It's not that. It's much more like being told to watch it so much where I was like, I now resent this. He also has at least 2 off-brand paintings of Captain Jack Sparrow. So that's important. He loves Captain Jack Sparrow. Nothing like him. He's nothing like him. He dressed up as him for like Halloween once, which they could not have different body types, more different body types. But he loves Captain Jack Sparrow.
Well, if they were on brand, would that be better or worse?
You know, I honestly don't know, because it's one thing to be like, I bought an official poster of Captain Jack Sparrow. It's another thing to be like, I was at a craft fair and saw a giant painting of Captain Jack. They're also big.
I think I weirdly have more respect for the latter.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I haven't seen them. How big are we talking? Like life size?
You know, like when you see
Like a
like in a
fresco?
museum, there's like a picture of like an old naval officer from like 1800,
And
like
it's
that
like-
size. Yeah.
So huge.
Huge.
Humongous. This
Humongous.
is amazing.
Yeah.
What is the story where he hit you?
I mean, what are the stories?
Stories.
The story, the one where I mentioned that the swinging back in the seat was he really wanted us to all like sports. And when I say that, I don't mean play sports. He was, to his credit, it was never like I want my son to play football, and if he doesn't play football, he's a loser. It was much more like I was hurting his feelings by not enjoying it. You know, it was very like, I don't get it. Like, I got you a subscription to Sports Illustrated. You don't read it. I take you to Miami Dolphins games, and you just bring a book or a Game Boy. Like looking back, I can tell how much distress it caused him that we didn't have this male connection. And it was never like, you know, like he was never like, and I think when he was mean about it, it was more like he was frustrated that I was frustrated, because I'd be like, I don't want to go to this game. It's Saturday, it's Sunday. You know, like I just had to go to, you know, church and CCD, and now I have to go to a Dolphins game. Like, let me be alone. I was like this little chubby, shy kid who just wanted to read books and play video games. And so I think that made him mad, which made me mad, and you kind of had this like feedback loop of resentment between a child and a dad who really wanted that child to enjoy the same things as him.
Was he more like dude sports guy?
He was. He wasn't like a bro, but he was like one of those guys that's like, men are supposed to like sports. Men are, and there would even be things that I could tell he didn't always enjoy. Like he would, when his friends or bosses, because I grew up in Florida, would go out on like a boat for a fishing thing. He didn't like fishing, but he'd be like, well, I gotta go because it's like, guys go fishing. He was like very into, in a plus way, like my brother was into sports and my dad was very good with, helping him with like hockey and being part of the hockey committee for that, high school county. But he's very much someone who is like, men do certain things, not in a bigoted way, but in a way where like any deviance from that confuses him or freaks him out. Like for a while, I had a pink iPhone case just because I got it for free and I didn't care. And having a pink iPhone case freaked him out. He's like, are you worried people are going to judge you or like they're going to think you're gay? And I'm like, I don't give a I don't fucking care. Like, why would that matter at all? And it wasn't him being like, no son of mine. It was more like, hey, just so you know, you have a pink case. Yeah. Like, worry.
My mom, it's so interesting. My mom would always, like, if she saw a man with long hair or with makeup or something, she'd just go, what's the point?
Yeah.
And I'm like, there is no point. It's not a point. Like, I think to her, it was like, this is obviously communicating something that I don't understand, right?
Yes.
And it's like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It can't be parsed that way. It's just expression.
Exactly.
It's making you uncomfortable.
And again, to his credit, it was just men based. Like I genuinely can't think of a memory where he like criticized the way a woman looked or said a woman was hot. I think for him, it was more like, I have to follow these instructions. These are instructions. I grew up in Florida, but he grew up in Iowa with, not hyper conservative parents, but, pretty strict parents. So I think for him, it was like, to be a man, I do this, and I do this. And if someone's not doing that, I have no idea how to deal with that.
What does he think of video games?
I think, well, here's the thing. My parents were pretty cool about them. One, my parents were never media safety people. Like my dad hates going to the movies alone. So when I was 7, he took me to see Terminator 2 at least 5 or 6 times in the theater because he loved Terminator 2, but didn't want to go. And my mom didn't want to go. So he's like, all right, little boy, let's go see some murder. My parents, to their credit, both grew up with comic books. My mom was a big Harvey Comics fan, Casper, that type of thing. My dad was a big Marvel Comics fan. And they're not comics fans anymore. But I think because they grew up in an era where people were criticizing them for that, they understood that perhaps some of the criticism of video games were in a similar vein of bad faith. And my mom, a lot of these video games, these old role-playing games, had a ton of reading. You're reading for hours. And my mom was like, I can tell you're reading. It looks like you're solving puzzles. If you're using your brain, this is not the worst thing you can do. And so, they were worried I didn't exercise or go outside, but the games themselves never really bothered them.
Do they enjoy games at all?
My mom doesn't. My dad really likes puzzle games like Tetris, mainly just Tetris, but like Dr. Mario, Tetris, Puzzle Bobble, a couple things like that. He'll do, free cell, things like that. Very, very rudimentary stuff, but he'll do it.
Yeah. What does your mom think of the book?
I actually do not know if she's read it. I don't know if my mom's read it yet. I think she was worried that I insulted her, but I don't really. I think the most I say is that she was good at throwing shoes, which she was. She was very accurate. She had a very good accuracy with shoe throwing. But I think she's like, even though she's mentioned usually pretty positively because she wasn't the problem parent I had to deal with, I think she's too nervous about it to read it. Like, I've told her what's in it, and I've told her what about her's in it, but I think she's still just too nervous to read it.
So, do you mind telling us him swinging at you in the car story?
Yeah, sure. No, we were just like, it was, I forgot what it was, but one of those times where we're at Miami Dolphins game, I, would often just sneak a book in because, this is the 90s when they're really just searching you to make sure you don't have booze on you. They don't care if you got like a Game Boy or whatever. And so I would like bring these things out and play them or read them, and he would get so embarrassed because he very much cares, going back to the man thing, what people around him think.
Right.
And to him, like a little boy sitting next to him reading like The Island of Dr. Moreau at a Dolphins game was the most embarrassing thing in the world. And so, and I also knew it was embarrassing. Part of the reason I did it was it was the only way I could really rebel as a kid. Like I couldn't say no. I was too small. He if I was going to be forced to go there, this was my small rebellion.
Right.
I would bring something from myself that was still entertaining to me, so I wasn't bored, but also I knew that it was going to embarrass him.
Mm-hmm.
I was an asshole even when I was like 9.
But is it actually embarrassing in any objective sense?
No.
Okay.
But
I don't. Yeah,
it's all
to me,
perceived.
Got it. Okay.
It's all perceived.
Right.
Like nobody
You knew-
cares.
Yeah, you knew how he was going to feel about it.
And I think it was just one of those times where, on the car ride home, it's like, that really fucking embarrasses me. I can't believe you would do that shit. And I'd be like, then don't fucking take me to these games. And like, swearing was also pretty open in my family.
Same.
But again, you get this feedback loop where eventually he'd get so mad that he'd like swing at me in the back seat, like one hand on the wheel, one hand swinging back, sometimes missing, sometimes hitting. But like, we got, pushed down or smacked at certain points. And I don't glorify it in the book in any way. And he has, in his older age, become much nicer about things. But yeah, there was a threat of violence kind of often.
Mm-hmm. So you had a dad with rage.
I had a dad with very big rage issues. I think that, he was kind of disappointed by certain aspects of his life. This was also my parents for, I would say the first half of my childhood, or maybe like most of my childhood, were often in a precarious spot financially. They both worked very long hours. Both of my parents worked, 12, 15-hour days. My mom worked multiple jobs at once, so she would go from like one retail place to another retail place to a customer service job. And, I didn't realize this then, and it doesn't excuse it, but they must have been so tired and so frustrated. And there were so many fights over like even things like screaming matches over like a JCPenney bill.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it was just sort of a powder keg. And I don't think it was necessarily like him being just mad at me. I think like he was mad at the world, and we probably were the only things within his control.
Mm-hmm.
Like he couldn't fight back at work. He couldn't, fight back against when his parents judged him for not making more money. But he could fight back against us. And I think that's kind of where a lot of that came from. And, I don't condone it. I don't like it, but I have grown over time to try to accept that he was in a bad place at the time.
Have you talked with him about it?
Yes.
What's his take?
His take is, I kind of say this in the book. The reason I write that really nice chapter about him is the genesis of it was he was like, you only remember bad things. You only remember the bad things I did. And I was like, no, remember when you did this and this and this and this? That was like one of the best moments. And I really looked up to you for doing that. And he was like, I don't remember that at all.
So it turns out he only remembers
right,
the bad moments too.
Exactly. My dad also, like, God bless him, has the memory of a goldfish. So it's like a conversation that he'll be like, we've never talked about this. You've never brought this up. And he'll be like, we did like last Christmas.
So one of the excerpted pieces, one of the more famous excerpts from the book, is about your Nintendo-themed wedding and ill-fated marriage.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So I was briefly married for about 2 years, or a year and a half, really. And it, was one of those things where we'd been dating a while. We were in our early 20s, and I didn't know I was, like, not early, but like early mid-20s.
Right.
And I didn't know what I was doing with my career. Like, I was doing comedy, but it wasn't like going anywhere yet. She wasn't sure what she was doing. And I think both of our parents really wanted us to get married. And so we kind of got married, and we shouldn't have. I wasn't prepared for it. She wasn't prepared for it. She still lived with her parents at the time. And so she didn't want to be far from them. So she didn't want to move out of her parents' place, but it wasn't really something we had discussed beforehand.
Where were you living at this point?
I was living in New York, and she was living in Jersey. So it wasn't far. It wasn't super far.
Where were you working? I just want to place this in chronology.
I was working at SNL when this happened, and we got divorced when I was at Nintendo.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Go back to your story.
Oh, yeah. So just, we got married, and it was a perfectly nice wedding. I will say, like, it was a beautiful wedding. It was this sort of, like, mansion that had been converted to an event space. So there was, like, in the backyard, perfect weather, very nice, ceremony. Everyone had a good time. And it was, when I say it was quasi-Mario themed, it was Mario themed in the sense that there was like little accoutrements that were Mario themed. Like, we had a giant normal wedding cake, but then we had like a smaller cake that looked like the castle from Super Mario Brothers. And, we had like little baggies of treats that were like chocolate shaped, like those superstars or magic mushrooms from the games. And around the dance floor, we actually set up a couple televisions with video game systems that had like Mario Kart and, Mario World and different games like that, which is dorky, but the kids loved. Like, everyone's children loved that wedding.
I bet.
Because they had something to do.
Was your wife into this stuff too?
Not at all, but she was very supportive of it. She was supportive. She was very cool about it. It was not a battle at all. I think because I was like, can we have this on the outer rim of the wedding versus the the main part of it?
Event.
She was much more comfortable with it, and people were still weirded out. But at this wedding, my brother, we're at the reception, and my ex's best friend gives her maid of honor speech, and it's very beautiful. It's very, I've known her ever since then. I see you guys, and I'm sure you'll be happy forever, which is, but but very sweet, very nice speech. And then my brother gets up, and what you should know is a few days before that, my brother was like, "I'm struggling, man. I don't know what to write for this fucking speech. Do I have to do it? I don't know what to do." And I was like, why don't you just watch some movies? Like, watch some movie speeches. In my head, thinking he'd watch like movie wedding speeches and just like pick up some things or like say a cliche or two. Because I didn't, I'm not somebody who needs it to be my perfect day. And neither was my ex-wife, to be fair. Like, it was not like if this goes not perfectly, this is a disaster. And so I was like, just from the heart, watch a movie. And what my brother did instead was he gave the speech from Any Given Sunday, the Al Pacino football film, where Al Pacino talks about how his life, he like ruined his own life and has pissed away everything and, turned away every woman who's loved him. And he just did a find and replace with the word football and marriage. So it'd be like marriage is a game of inches. And like he replaced I think losing with divorce. Like, it was genuinely a control F. And that was the point of it. Like the moment, I would say within a sentence or two, I knew what was happening. And because I'm not a sports fan, but I've seen that movie. And the table of comedians that were my friends, because I was still new to comedy, so I only had a handful of comedian friends. That table went insane. It was it was almost like watching an early 90s Arsenio Hall where people were screaming, laughing, and hooting. It was crazy. And you could tell every other table hated it so much with the deepest fire in their hearts.
Did they even understand what was happening?
I think some understood what was happening. I think some understood and some were confused, but I think either way they thought he was being disrespectful.
Got it.
Because I think that they thought he wasn't taking it seriously enough. When in reality, my brother was taking it serious probably the only way he knew how, which is to try to make it as funny as possible, but in a weird way that wasn't just because what I didn't want was my brother to be like, my brother, here's a funny anecdote from when we were kids. And he didn't want that either. And I think for him, this was the best I love you he could have done.
That's sweet. And then what happened with the marriage?
The marriage fell apart. We didn't live together immediately. Morally not great, but I fell in love with someone else and I told her about that. And then we tried to make it work. But by that point, there was a lot of resentment built up. And I moved to Seattle for Nintendo and I was like, look, you can come with me and move in with me, or I can go alone. But this is kind of a big moment. And she came with me. But by that point, we had just realized that this should not have happened. And so there was a lot of fighting, a lot of loneliness, a lot of, I don't know. It just felt immediately felt kind of roommatey. And, to be fair, it's a lot of my fault for not taking it more seriously when I proposed. I was just sort of going through the motions of what I thought I was supposed to do. And so, but fortunately we didn't have land. We didn't have kids. We didn't have, she owned a car and I didn't. And it's not like I was going to ask for a car. And so in Washington State at the time, and it might still be the law, if it's completely uncontested, you can file by mail. You get a notary, they notarize the paperwork, you file, and then 3 months later you file a second time after a cool down period. And so that's what we did and kind of ended the marriage. So it was very hard. I'm glad that we almost sped run through the bad just because I could have seen a world where we tried to fix it by having a kid or, push through the resentment the way that, I saw my parents do at certain points. And it just felt like, let's end this before it doesn't just cost us financially, but costs us much more on a deep personal level.
And what happened with the other person you fell in love with?
We dated a while and, broke up after a little bit. That was, more like a normal relationship.
But wait, so you had fallen in love with this person,
Yeah.
but then you're like, I am still in this marriage.
Yes.
But then when the marriage broke up, you
Went back
dated
to that person. Yes.
Because I'm sitting here thinking, well, if you're in love with someone else, of course this
Yeah.
can't really work.
And I think part of it was just like we were spending, even from day one, so much time apart that it was,
Right.
it's still my fault. It's still shitty, but it's still in your head. You're like, I'm not seeing a partner. I'm socializing and meeting people. I'm in this weird state where I feel like I'm single, where I'm going home alone every night, but also I'm not single, but it's not like, my spouse is at war. It almost feels like being married and someone doesn't quite want to live with you because they want to live with their parents more, maybe.
Right. Well, yeah, there's that of like, if she was really in it, she should have been really in it.
Well, I think, and I think she was in it. I think we just hadn't really discussed what our individual versions of in it were.
That makes sense. In the excerpt or in that chapter, you're very, very critical of yourself.
Yes. Well, I'm not super proud of how it went down.
But I mean, you just talk about sort of being you just were like, amorphous and not ready yet for that.
Yeah. I think that was a big part of it. Like I hadn't dated a ton of people before that. I'd dated people, but like I hadn't had a lot of life experiences. And I think I just was not ready for the gravity of it. Because I guess, you're in your mid-20s, you're floating around and you're like, yeah, I'll get married, I'll move in with someone. That seems nice. And that's not the right way to approach that, especially when you're making $0 and your parents have $0.
Yeah. And you haven't talked to her since, right?
No, we haven't talked since, like, I think we signed the paperwork and went to a diner to have like a last lunch and that was it.
Well, if she ever reads the book, I feel like she comes off, you portray her in a nice light. Well,
yeah, I don't, the story isn't, one, I'm the one who kind of fucked up in a certain way in terms of the falling in love with someone else, but also, I wanted the chapter to be about the funny part and the game stuff. I didn't want it to be a litigation of our marriage, and I didn't want her, if she did read it or stumble upon it, I didn't want it to seem like a out of nowhere haymaker at her.
Right.
Because she doesn't deserve that.
Why is it called a haymaker?
I have no idea, but it sounds cool to say.
Yeah, it does.
It sounds very cool to say.
But it's like, are you punching someone and then hay is coming out of their head?
Yeah, probably. That's probably that might be kind of some origin somehow. Like knock the stuffing out of them.
So I think it is now time.
Yes.
To do Just Me or Everyone.
Sometimes I ponder on something I have thought or done. Is it just me or everyone?
All right. Might you have one?
Yes. And this just happened 2 days ago. Have you ever been to like a restaurant or something and the fire alarm goes off? I always think, or anywhere you, like a store, if a store goes, a fire alarm or the security alarm goes off, I immediately start searching myself thinking I did it somehow. And so like I was at Sugarfish having like, sushi with my manager and it's just fire alarm goes off, just like, meh, 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 meh. And I swear to God, I started looking around as if in this chair I could have like elbowed down a fire alarm. And I feel guilty. Like I'm worried someone's going to come up to me and be like, hey, sir, did you do something? Like I'm so worried. Like I will, like if my bag goes off leaving a store, that is like a panic attack. Because I'm like, I bought this stuff. I promise. I bought it. Or, that one weird time when you like buy something from another store and then walk into a different store and it sets it off.
Too.
And you're like, I swear I bought this. I can show you. And usually they're like, yeah, man, whatever. Just go on in. Like,
I know.
You're coming in from the outside. And so I really like, I don't know if anyone else has that, but it's almost like whenever there's like an alarm or an emergency, I assume that somehow I directly caused it and I'm about to go to jail.
How do you feel going through the metal detector in an airport?
Usually a little nervous, like, because there's a line, it's a little easier because it's like step. But like if I set it off, I'm like, oh man, I'm so sorry. Oh, I forgot my watch or something. And they're so like, they don't care.
No, they don't.
And the fact that I'm like, worried only slows things down and only annoys them a little bit. But like, and I'll try to be like, because because I like video games, I travel with a lot of equipment that has wires and batteries and things, and that in a bag under a X-ray can look like a bomb. And so I get searched a lot. And I'm always like, just a lot of video games. I mean, I know it's ridiculous. I can't believe, it's so silly. Like, I have to socially explain the situation away. And they know it's fine. They do the stupid little search and their little dumb bomb test. And they're like, go, you child, out of here. But it worries me so much. Like, I'm unable to keep my cool in those situations.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like if an alarm went off and they were like, did you commit a murder? I'd be like, I might have. Like, I might like just immediately feel that way.
Yeah. No, I know. Well, that's why I bring up the metal detector, because I always feel like, oh, phew, there are not drugs in my butt.
Right.
And it's like, but I never have put them up there. But I still always feel like, oh, relief.
Right. Oh, I didn't leave this in my bag. I didn't somehow leave like a butcher knife in my bag.
Yeah, exactly. Although did I go through with water one time and actually get through? Either I actually made it through with water and I was like, oops, I wasn't supposed to do that. Or they pulled it out of my bag. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot to throw that out.
Yeah.
And then like worried, are they going to think I was trying to, pull a fast one?
Are they mad at me?
Yes. So I have that. In that scenario, I'm trying to think if I have it when someone pulls an alarm or when an alarm goes off. I don't think I tend to think that I did that. But I do, if an alarm goes off when I'm leaving a store, that does make me nervous because like, they're going to think I tried to steal this, but I didn't.
Yeah.
But they never really do. They know that they forgot to remove that little thing.
Right.
Honestly, it's been so long since I've been shopping in a store. Everything's online, but I remember these circumstances. Tony, how do you react?
I'm like somewhere in the middle because I am very paranoid about things like that generally, and like always have this inner fear of getting in trouble for whatever it might be. But for some reason, if I walk out of a store and that alarm goes off, I just keep walking every time, and nothing ever happens. But also on the opposite side of that is why this doesn't make any sense. If I go in like just some little like small shop that's like the employee behind the counter and I'm the only one in the store, I am constantly paranoid that they think that I'm up to something.
Yeah.
So I don't know why those two don't quite go together, but yeah.
No, I know what you mean.
I think I've mentioned that if I'm ever somewhere in public alone and I'm just killing time, I feel like I look. Have I talked about that? Like,
I don't know, but I know exactly what you're.
I feel like I look really sus.
Yeah.
Like I can never just sit in my car killing time if I'm in front of someone's house or something. I feel like I need to justify my existence.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay.
Exactly.
I'm not. But really, like, look at me. I don't look like someone who's a peeping Tom or something.
Well,
but I don't.
That's how it's so brilliant.
I know. That's why I am a peeping Tom. Yes, yeah. I don't know why I'm so worried that I look creepy.
Yeah.
But I am. Thank God for a phone, really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I also kind of have the opposite with like fire alarms in general is stupidly, if one does go off in public, my brain just always just like, oh, it's a mistake.
Yeah.
And like, there's never panic for some reason.
But literally, has there ever been an actual fire when one has gone off? I mean, I can think of like living in an apartment building in New York where we had to, climb down all these stairs, and it's always an accident that went off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, do you have a hey, go fuck yourself?
Yes. Let me pull that up. So there's a subset of people who, because I don't have kids, and I have no problem with kids. I play video games and buy a lot of toys. But there's a subset of people who get furious at you if you don't have children, and they can go fuck themselves because it's like, and I don't mean people who are like, oh, you should have kids, or like, you know what, you don't think you'd love it, but you love it. I don't mind that. There are people who will almost be mad at you, and you see this a lot online, where it's like, what, you don't care about your legacy? And it's
geez.
No, I don't really care. You don't want to pass, your only reason for being here is passing on your genetic code. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really have to do that. Like, it's not, it's not taxes. Like, no one's going to come to my door for that. Like, it's this weird aggression where people, and, relatives say it, but also, like, you'll see it online where people will be like, you're so selfish. You're so selfish for not having children. And it's like, am
I mean, there's an argument that it's selfless.
Yeah, like I've never been at Disney World standing behind a big family and been like, I'm glad they're generous. Like I've never, you know what I mean? Like I don't know why other people are bothered by it, because I'm not bothered by people having children.
Right.
Like I've never had a friend have a kid and be like, the good days are over now. But I feel
but when someone pops out their fourth or fifth kid, aren't you ever like, okay, that's enough?
Yeah, but that's a little more just like, that seems like a lot. That's like if I find out a friend's working like on 3 different shows at once. I'm like, I mean, I'm happy for you, but how?
Right. By the way, I have 2 friends who both have 4 children each, and I just like to say, you guys don't live in Southern California, so it is acceptable. But here, I just feel like, how can you do that? I'm fine with it, but it just always seems like it's like having 6 dogs or something. It's just so much. Like, how do you do that?
I think that is the conversion math. Is 4 children equals 6 dogs. But yeah, just like, so it is a fuck yourself to people who are mad about that. Not people who like having children or are supportive of it, but like the people who get in your face, whether you're a relative or like, weirdly, people on vacation do that. Like sometimes like either on the road or like, you know, taking a trip somewhere and you meet like another couple from America and they don't find out you have kids. It's almost like, well, why not? Like, why don't you have kids? And I don't want to be, and I will say the assumption is always, oh, you don't have kids because you want to party. You don't have kids because you want the easy life. And in reality, it's like, I don't want to have kids because I did not have the best childhood and I am not confident enough in my own ability to not repeat those mistakes. So I would rather not. And, you know, that's sadder and more, and I don't want to get into that. And so it's almost like, just, why does it matter to you if I have kids or not? Like, why does it bother you so much, stranger I do not know?
Hey, stranger.
Hey, go fuck yourself.
Tony, do you feel like people get in your face about not having kids?
Not really, actually. Yeah, I know that definitely some family members maybe wished I do, but they're good at keeping that to themselves.
That's nice.
Mostly.
That's always nice.
Yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah.
Tony comes from polite Midwestern stock.
Yeah, I come from bitter Midwestern stock.
And then, might you have a Podcast Pal product pick?
Yes.
Podcast Pals product picks.
So I recently, during the tariff panic, bought an iPad mini because I have like 8 different e-readers and I, you know, am constantly like reading for things. And so I was like, this is the perfect size. I've been wanting to buy it. It might get more expensive soon. And so I bought this little tiny iPad and I bought a Microsoft Universal folding keyboard. And it's so thin. It's the keyboard is thinner than the notebook you're writing on right now, which is very thin for anyone listening.
Yeah.
And so I can have this full keyboard in my bag and this little iPad that both is great for reading, but like if I'm in a pinch and need to do some work, I have this tiny little workstation available to me at any time. And it has been way more useful than I thought. Like when I bought this stuff, I was like, this is I'm giving myself a treat, but you don't need this. Should you really be spending this money? You don't. And I have found myself so many times being like, well, I don't have my laptop on me and I don't want to go home. I'll just pull this out really quick and handle this email, handle this work. And it is so cool. It does make me look ridiculous because I have this like little screen that's probably like 7 inches propped up on a table and this little dinky keyboard folded out while like a man who is not necessarily as small as he'd like to be is like typing on it. But at the same time, it's so convenient and it's not life-changing, but it is life-improving more than I thought.
Do they still make the iPad mini?
They do. I just got the newest version of it.
Okay.
So they just I think like in October announced the newest one. So it's like, you know, it's almost like a Kindle Fire type size thing, but it has been perfect. I used to have a giant iPad because I thought I wanted the big one. I wanted that big giant one.
I know the one you mean.
And I never took it anywhere because it was heavy or I was worried about breaking it. Yeah. And this is just everywhere. I just throw it in the bag. It's so nice.
Yeah. Interesting.
I used to travel like that. I would occasionally leave my laptop at home, and you don't think of a laptop as being heavy at all. But if you put an iPad in instead of a laptop, it's amazing how much lighter your bag is.
Yeah. I had the iPad mini when it first came out.
Yeah.
And I liked it. And then I typically don't use an iPad, but I think if I were to, it would be.
Yeah.
I find the iPad itself is actually not even the giant one, but it's pretty heavy.
It is a little heavy. And the nice thing about the small one is it's
something.
nicer.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like a heavy phone instead of, you know, a light laptop.
Right. Can we just circle back to your 8 e-readers?
Yes.
Why do you have so many?
Because, well, one, I really like e-ink paper. I think it looks cool. And so I have like a couple Kindles over the lifespan of the Kindle. I have a Kobo, which is a different company that's also does ebooks. I have like a few like random devices that from brands I can't name from like China that are like their own Android-based e-readers. They're just like, I don't know, there's something about having a screen that looks more like a book that's very appealing to me. Mm-hmm. At the same time, it's like having to have a different e-reader for each different shop that I'm buying books from, or having to go through this process of like ripping the books off of the device, converting them to a different format, and uploading them to a different e-reader. All of that was becoming a little arduous. And so I was like, I'll just do this on a regular screen.
Right. What's Kobo?
Kobo is, I believe it's a Canadian company, I want to say, but they're kind of like, imagine like a Kindle competitor. So they sell ebooks. Yeah, that's the basic way I could put it. So it's not like Amazon itself where they sell everything. Mm-hmm. I think it's more just like they're the ebook competitor. So
do you prefer an e-reader to a book?
No, I prefer a book.
Okay.
But just living in New York City, space is so limited that, you know, if I buy a large book, like a physically large book, I have to get rid of another book on a shelf or like put it, you know, find space for it.
Right.
And so for me, a lot of the time, especially if it's like, yeah, I'll check out this novel, an e-reader is just more convenient for purely space reasons.
Mm-hmm. Mike Drucker, it was delightful getting to know you, having you on the show. Everyone needs to go out and get Good Game, No Rematch. I would like to remind everyone, actually, I don't even think I ever said it. I would like to inform everyone that I am on Patreon. Allison Rosen. It goes at the end of the URL. What I meant to say is patreon.com/Allison Rosen. You can get all sorts of fun stuff there. There's episodes of The Friend Zone. That is my Patreon podcast. There's a level where you can text me and I'll text you back. And lately, actually for months now, I have been doing a daily text update wherein I share all the sudsy details of this whole settling my parents' estate drama and such, and other stuff, you know, breaking fish news that happens there. I've become obsessed with fish tanks. It's a weird direction.
We all love ichthyology.
Thank you for knowing that. Yes. So Patreon. You can also submit carbohydrates for the Thursday show. Patreon.com/Allison Rosen. Subscribe do the annual subscription and get 2 months free. Also, I am on Substack. AllisonRosen.substack.com. Follow me everywhere, please. Thank you for your direct support of the show. As you'll notice, quite thin on ads. Mike Drucker.
Yes.
Where can they find you?
You can find me on social media. I don't use Twitter as much anymore. It's mostly promotional, but you can find me at Mike Drucker. Things like Blue Sky, Instagram. If you just search for Mike Drucker is Dead, usually you'll find me. So TikTok, Instagram, all that. Mike Drucker is Dead.
And is there anything else? So obviously they should go get the book.
Go get the book. It's available. It's available digital, hardcover. It's available anywhere, so you can get it Amazon, Barnes and Noble, independent bookstore. If you want to go to your library, please do. I also, if you like my voice, hello. I do the audiobook version. And I read it very much more in a stand-up cadence than I do in a just narration cadence. And the reaction to that has been more positive than I could have hoped. So if you like audiobooks, please do.
Excellent. Tony Thaxton.
Just Instagram at Tony Thaxton. Some Motion City soundtrack shows coming up this summer, and some big news with that as well soon. So keep your eyes out for that.
What could it be?
Oh.
Guys, I already know. I know the news, but I'm not going to tell you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Listeners, thank you for listening. I love you. You matter. Goodbye.
Hey, do you know about the Allison Rosen Show? We had a good time, but now we gotta go.